Good afternoon, everyone who is on this Zoom webinar and also watching on YouTube. It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar that is on the topic of building a national integrity system for prevention of corruption in Armenia. My name is Alex Cooley. I'm the current director of the Harriman Institute, professor of political science at Barnard College. And this event is being brought to you in co-sponsorship with the Armenian Center at Columbia University and the Center for the Advancement of Public Integrity at Columbia Law School. I just wanted to say just a few words about what this event is and the series that it is kicking off, along with my co-chair Matthew Murray, who is adjunct professor at SIPA and at the Harriman Institute, teaching courses on corruption in Eurasia and innovating solutions for corruption in Eurasia. Matthew and I, for a few years now, have been dedicated to promoting an interdisciplinary and interprofessional dialogue about how to combat corruption and to come up with innovative solutions and techniques. I think one of the things about our region, and this is the post-Soviet or Eurasian region, is that it receives a lot of attention regarding its systemic corruption, kleptocracy. We hear a lot of the bad news, but we don't do as good of a job talking about the innovations and the real ground level efforts made by civil society, scholars, policymakers, committed advocates who are innovating new techniques to deal with the issue, and techniques that we can learn from. And I think that is the point of this seminar, is to focus the spotlight on innovations across the former Soviet states, with apologies for the designation. So in addition to today's seminar in Armenia, expect sessions on possibly Belarus, Moldova, and then we will concentrate on a half-a-day seminar on Ukraine, just because there's so many things happening in Ukraine that, as we've all seen, also affect us here. So thank you again for joining us. We hope we can continue to build this network of like-minded professionals and academics and welcome you back to future sessions. So now I'd like to welcome our guests and turn the floor over to Matthew, who will be moderating the session. Just a quick word of instruction: you can use the Q&A function on your Zoom to send us questions. And please do that, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can, or type your questions into YouTube and they will be relayed to us here. So Matthew, thank you again for your leadership on this issue and your partnership. You yourself have spent the last 18 months actually dealing with corruption issues in Armenia. So this is an excellent panel to kick off the series with.
Well, thank you, Alex, and welcome everybody to the first forum of 2021. And I want to offer a special welcome to those of you from Armenia who've been able to join today, and also want to send a special thanks to Senator Menendez, who is now the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee. One of his senior staffers, Damian Murphy, who works on Armenia, has joined us today, and we greatly appreciate your leadership. So why Armenia? Why did we decide to start this year's series of forums with Armenia? Well, there are a number of reasons, and I'm going to start with the fact that the Velvet Revolution engendered sufficient political will for leaders in Armenia to take a very strategic look at the question of how to design a new architecture, including institutions, laws, and leadership resources to approach corruption as a systemic problem. And when they did that design, they were very studious and looked at their own past failures in the area. They looked at global best practices, and they drew also on the resources offered by the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is, among other things, a center of learning and thinking and teaching on the subject of how to fight corruption. And so it's a great partnership, if you will, between government reformers the U.S. Agency for International Development and Government, and highly skilled and talented leaders in the country of Armenia. It's important also to recognize that Armenia is in a region which is a strategically important to the future of the rule of law and democracy. The post-Soviet legacy lingers. There are a number of forces which pull government sort of towards networks that are controlled by oligarchic leaders and are engaging in systematic rent-seeking. And so Armenia is working right along that strategic line, if you will, and offers the hope of creating new models for the future. And finally, of course, the recent war highlights the difficulties that Armenia faces, in particular with geopolitical externalities. And it highlights the fact that the future of Armenia is highly dependent on human resources, on the will and resilience and talent of the people to create a sovereign nation under these circumstances. And so we're very pleased to be able to host this event today, focused on the good work that's been done in the region since the Velvet Revolution, and to have two of the pillars of leadership of that work with us today. And so let me start by introducing them, and then each of them will give maybe 5-10 minutes of remarks, and then we'll go to a Q&A. So I'll start with the first chairperson of the Commission on the Prevention of Corruption. Haykuhi Harutyunyan is with us today. Haykuhi is a nationally recognized award-winning civil society leader from Armenia who has been engaged over the past 15 years in work on human rights, and she has conducted major trials defending the human rights of politically prosecuted individuals in Armenia, including events that resulted in mass arrests due to political protests. She is a graduate of the Minnesota School of Law's program on law and human rights, as well as the Stanford University program on development and democracy. We're also joined today by Adam Stefan, who's the director of the Office of Democracy, Rights, and Governance for the USAID mission in Armenia. Adam, in that capacity, is responsible for developing and managing a range of programs to promote democracy and focused on the rule of law and anti-corruption. Adam has also served at USAID in Tanzania and Ethiopia. The office that he represents in Armenia, known as DRG, is connected to a global hub in Washington, where they partner with 90 missions across the globe, USAID missions across the globe, including in Armenia, and they share learning, they share best practices, and they develop new models using digital tools, using big data, and most importantly, applying the lessons learned from individual experiences in country over a period of time. And so the DRG office is an especially important component of USAID, and we're very, very pleased to have Adam with us today. So Adam, we're going to start with you, and why don't you give us a sense, if you may, of how the post-Velvet Revolution led USAID to rethink some of its prior work in Armenia and launch, with new tools and approaches.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. And also just thanks for featuring Armenia. I think we're always happy to talk about the great work that's being done here, and particularly by Haykuhi and the CPC. It is something that we do see as a potential model for other countries in the future as well. Yeah, I'm going to try and give a little bit of a perspective of what led us at USAID to start to support the CPC and take a systemic approach to addressing corruption through collective action. And we do have a long history of engagement to address corruption in Armenia. But prior to the Velvet Revolution, our approach was quite different. You know, as you've alluded to, Matthew, it was a very challenging development context to be able to take systemic approaches. Having power concentrated among ruling elites and oligarchs, and that lack of political will for real systemic reform, you know, very much undermined whatever institutions of democratic accountability that were there. So we had taken what we might call a top-down, bottom-up approach. So, you know, on the one hand, finding those narrow targeted windows of opportunity where we could identify political will or a champion or request for assistance from the government to advance a specific reform, which was not necessarily packaged as anti-corruption, but areas you know, that would have a tangible impact on addressing corruption. So one of these was, you know, our support for the Open Government Partnership, which ultimately led Armenia to becoming part of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which committed the government to requiring the disclosure of beneficial ownership in the mining industry, you know, which is a major step that took place before the Velvet Revolution to start making those commitments towards preventing corruption. And that experience, and I'll talk about that in a bit, is one that also led us to see, you know, the real advantages of this collective action approach. You know, another one was pension reform. You mentioned, Matthew, using you know, new tools, digital systems. This was an area where we were able to support the government develop electronic systems that were used to centralize payments and improve accuracy of data, which reduced the risks of corruption in the distribution of social benefits, which we all know is you know, a major source of corruption. And these are two successful examples, but there are many others where the political will that we thought might have been there didn't end up being there. And at the same time as targeting those specific reforms, we also provided a lot of support to civil society to be able to engage in these reforms, both as advocates in policy dialogues, as watchdogs to hold government accountable, but also to engage citizens into the oversight of reforms, and to begin educating and raising awareness among citizens on issues of corruption. Also provided support to independent media, and in particular investigative journalists, to be able to report on these reforms, continue educating the population, but also keeping that spotlight on corruption. And, you know, so for us, the Velvet Revolution very much ushered in an opportunity to pursue more strategic and systemic reforms. It brought to power a government which clearly made eradicating corruption one of its highest priorities. It also had, you know, I think in the post-Soviet space, completely unprecedented levels of citizen support and public trust. But that also came with incredibly high expectations from the public. And so its ability to address corruption was very much seen as a test of its commitment to democracy. But that political will, which we saw in tangible steps, as you mentioned, the anti-corruption strategy, this very ambitious whole of society approach, really enabled us to shift our entire country strategy towards embracing that window of opportunity, towards supporting consolidation of some of these key democratic reforms and institutions, to really see these reforms translate into concrete and tangible improvements in the lives of citizens. And, one of the foundations of that strategy is focusing on anti-corruption efforts. And we're looking to do that by focusing on the capacity building of key institutions of accountability, such as the CPC, and reinforcing that through this collective action approach with support to those agents of accountability in civil society, in media, and citizens. We focused our efforts on the CPC because they are the central institution that's mandated to prevent corruption, both on the supply and on the demand side. And we do believe that if institutions such as the CPC and integrity systems are strengthened, if those laws and regulations for corruption prevention are effectively enforced, and there's collective action to hold all of these entities that are engaged in corruption prevention mutually accountable, then the opportunities for corruption will be reduced, and public demand for improved governance is going to sustain. I think that's one of the key points for us, is sustaining these gains beyond the current government that might have political will, and looking at who comes next, and are these institutions able to continue what they're doing. And we've been incredibly proud to support the CPC from its very conception. As Matthew mentioned, we provided advice to the government on different models of anti-corruption agencies when they were deciding between a universal model or separate models between prevention and enforcement, really drawing on a lot of that best practice that Matthew mentioned from our DRG Center, learning from countries around the world that have attempted to set up similar structures and take similar approaches. When the CPC was established, being able to partner with it to support it on its organizational structure and helping it to develop methodologies for integrity checking, for asset declarations, for all of these new mandates that they've taken on. And, I'll say a word on why we see the collective action approach as, being really important here. And that's because corruption prevention isn't just based on legislative or institutional changes. As in many countries, I think in Armenia, we've seen it's very much a societal problem, as much it is a political or criminal problem. When we look at global corruption indexes and surveys, we see that there's high levels of tolerance for corruption. Many respondents in Armenia believing that there's not a duty to report corruption, or that reporting of corruption is not something that's socially acceptable. And so there's a need to shift the conversation and the perception around corruption and anti-corruption reforms from one that's really seeking to be reactive or punitive to one that's comprehensive and balanced. And for that to happen, it's really essential that all of the key stakeholders, be it in the public, the private sector, civil society, are genuinely invested in these efforts, understand what their roles and responsibilities are, but then are holding each other mutually accountable in this endeavor. And, I mentioned the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative previously, and that's one where we really saw the success of this multi-stakeholder approach, where all the stakeholders' rights and responsibilities were equal, where there was consensus decision-making, And this is in contrast to some of the anti-corruption bodies that we had seen prior to the Velvet Revolution here. The Anti-Corruption Council was one, which was one that was supposed to define the policy direction of anti-corruption reforms in the country. And civil society and eventually the private sector were represented there, but it wasn't as equal, and it wasn't a decision-making body. And so, to see this reform being sustained, we very much see the multi-stakeholder collective action approach as being necessary. I think I'll stop there, and I think it'll be good to hear from Haykuhi a little bit more about the CPC itself and some of its roles and responsibilities.
Well, Adam, thank you very, very much. And what strikes me as you're describing the evolution of this is how much work has gone into the particular design of an institution. Across the globe, there are over 100 of these types of agencies. They're known as anti-corruption agencies under the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, and there's all sorts of guidance under that convention regarding how to appropriately build an institution locally. And in Armenia, a lot of due diligence and creative thinking went into designing what is called the Commission on Prevention of Corruption, or the CPC for this audience. I just want to make sure that's what we're referring to. And so, Madam Chairwoman, you were given this job in November 2019 to be the first leader of the Commission on Prevention of Corruption, and really were given the mantle of the Velvet Revolution in a way. And I know for you, it's been an extraordinary journey since November 2019. Why don't you share with us your thoughts about the origin of this and where it's headed?
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks so much for having me today in this event and giving me the chance to present the work that CPC has done so far, and hopefully also inspiring with our approach and innovative ways how we see tackling the systemic corruption in the country. As it has been already mentioned, the Commission has been established as one of the chain institutions to struggle against corruption after the Velvet Revolution. So the CPC is the #1 institution to prevent corruption, but then the Anti-Corruption Committee, which has the investigative mandate, being kind of based largely on the function of law enforcement, and anti-corruption courts will follow to complete this kind of comprehensive approach that the government adopted after the revolution to fight against systemic corruption in the country. So the CPC, or Corruption Prevention Commission, has been established in late November of 2019 with the elections of the members or commissioners by the parliament. So I think, and I personally believe, that there has been this root of independency for commission and commissioners, as for the first time in the country for such kind of institution, the all political parties represented in the parliament had a chance to nominate a member for the commission, and they build a consensus around the appointed members as commissioners. And this kind of approach, I believe, ensure that mandate that is given to CPC can be implemented independently, but also there is this joint responsibility for the success of the CPC and for the success of the mandate that the CPC is given to implement. So for the preventive mission that the CPC has, there is an extended mandate for us. I picked up some of them just to present and to kind of also cover those aspects that are really very innovative. At least we think that those are innovative approaches that will ensure success for the preventive work of the corruption in the country, but also will ensure that the institution with such kind of mandate is built in the country in a way that regardless of the further political change in the country and us as a commissioners, as a members, there will not be any possibility to bring back all the processes that we probably will achieve as a success. So first and very important function that the CPC has is the supervision over the ensuring accountability for the public officials through the system of declarations on assets, income, interest, and expenditure. So we, as a new elected members of the CPC, very much underline the importance of using electronic technologies for this system, and worked very hard to develop the kind of concept of the electronic platform through which, using the existing algorithmic decision-making functions, this analysis of declarations of public officials will be possible. It will be automated, and it will serve as a ground to tackle any possible change in the wealth of public official, but also for the members of the public, for the family members of the public officials, to prevent and to target the possibility of corruption from the roots. So we are very hard working on making this possibility. I will share probably the link also for the bidding, and those who probably will have interest and have the companies that could be interested in participating for developing this system can kind of cooperate with us. The second important function that I see, which gives kind of hope that the CPC will success and will build also chain of chain of supporters for the CPC within the government, is so-called integrity checking process. So the CPC is given mandate to do the large-scale integrity assessment of candidates and nominees of certain public positions, including prosecutorial nominees and the judicial nominees. And as I mentioned before, these new coming institutions, Anti-Corruption Committee and Anti-Corruption Courts, will benefit from this, as the judges and also prosecutors and investigators will be selected for these positions, and the opinion of the CPC on their background, including work experience, but also their connections, possibilities of any kind of conflict of interest, previous experience in having or participating in any possible corruption deals or any kind of unlawful actions will be checked by the CPC, but also their wealth will be kind of analyzed by the CPC to demonstrate whether there is any kind of sign that can confirm that the person previously has been engaged in any kind of action and benefited materially, that has sign of already being part of a corruption deal. So using this mandate, I would like to mention that the CPC had a chance during 2020 already do this integrity assessment for 47 candidates for different positions. So we had prosecutorial nominees, judicial nominees, candidates for the Constitutional Court of the country, members for the Supreme Justice Council, and it already approved itself that this is a good really exercise that gives information about the experience of the person, but also presents the possible risk, how this person can behave in future if he or she is appointed for the certain position, and especially for those kind of important positions where decision-making power is given and there is a huge expectation from the public for those kind of decisions. Another very important mandate that CPC has, and we have been working on this with the support of USAID and other donor colleagues to make it really the one that will really serve as a ground to tackle very from the root the systemic corruption in the country, is kind of establishing the system for corruption risk assessment in the government, in a government agencies. So this approach is this approach has an idea that once the risks for corruption are identified and the follow-up activities are designed and implemented, then there is no place, hopefully, for the corruption to kind of be there, and there is a possibility to respond and react quickly to remove all these risks. So the CPC has worked and developed methodology that will soon be adopted, and then the practical implementation will start with 8 line ministries and 5 public institutions. And after the first round, we hope really very much that this kind of exercise also will be digitalized in a way that it supports building the system, which is really resistance against the possibilities of having corruption within the public institutions themselves. And the last one that I picked up to speak a little bit is large-scale educational and awareness raising activities and programs that the CPC will ensure for all groups and for all levels of the society. And here I would really like to underline that we kind of don't take this mandate on educational aspect and the awareness raising just as a possibility to transfer some kind of knowledge, to exchange the experience between the similar institutions, or kind of have only prepared materials. I think our approach is very much there to ensure that through the education, through the capacity building and awareness raising, we ensure behavioral change, not only for public officials, but also for the members of our society. As it has been already mentioned, the kind of nature of systemic corruption in post-Soviet countries, including Armenia, is based on the mutual consensus between public officials and citizens. So, and there is this notion among citizens that I can't do anything alone. So if I want and I wish to solve my case, it's the unique case. It doesn't create this systemic corruption. So let me to take this opportunity of solving my problem or the issue using methods or some kind of influence which it is in its nature corrupted. But then I will speak that I am against corruption. So with this approach of kind of targeting educational programs and large awareness raising programs, we really aim to change the behavior. We really aim to kind of educate people to become our partners in this difficult exercise, and really to ensure that corruption is not only there for public officials, but there is a part for citizens and they have their own responsibilities as well. So we have started in late November, and it was a really difficult year to us to go through having this kind of full mandate for the implementation of number of tasks on everyday basis, but also keeping this understanding that we need to build a sustainable institution, given this chance of being first members or representing the first composition of the CPC is really a big responsibility, not only for me, but for co-commissioners, that we kind of do not miss anything which is important for the institution. We do not just want to have or perform actions on everyday basis to demonstrate that we are doing and we are performing the tasks which are there for us in the legislation or in the anti-corruption strategic program, but we kind of committed ourselves to ensure that very well-rooted institution is built there, and he has these capacities to sustain against systemic corruption. The important aspect also is that the CPC will serve as a model for other state institutions, how we kind of treat the cases, how we treat responsibilities that we are given will serve also as a model for other state agencies and other public officials. And we just want kind of to create this change, ensuring that at the horizontal level, there is extension of the ideas, an extension of the cooperation, and in the end, when the CPC with its current composition ends its mandate, then these kind of roots are there in other governmental agencies as well, and other public officials also, with the understanding of the importance of institution, will continue their work in a way that they are cooperating for this important task. We had really good, I think, cooperation with the international partners to have the grounds for the institution and for the foundation in a way that gives us hope, but also promises that building on such kind of grounds, the change in the country, the change in the government will really happen very soon. We do not, and we didn't use that much, I think, this time during this last year, demonstrating and speaking much about our work, but because of the long-term goals that we put for ourselves, we just kind of limited working internally and creating something that will kind of convince everyone outside of the CPC that this is possible. We started with 40 people here at the CPC, though the staff is not fully equipped yet. But having even the result that we shared with the government and presented, now we propose the amendments of the structure for the CPC, and we will have the extension of the staff as well. So we are proposing having 25 members as members for the CPC as a newcomers, and we are preparing ourselves well to ensure the relevant capacity building activities for our staff as well. So the concept of the conflict of interest, incompatibility of public officials, building the code of conduct and ensuring the oversight over the implementation are another task that the CPC has. And we have done a lot of work in that regard to ensure that the public officials also will behave and demonstrate themselves with a new behavior that inspires citizens and gives them the belief that, yes, this work is possible and our life is going to be changed. And there we have also our own responsibility. So I will stop here. I will be happy to take more questions and to speak more about details for each aspect I have mentioned. Just like kind of completing my part of speech, I kind of personally really believe and have a strong kind of trust, not only for myself, but for my co-commissioners, that with this chance given us to serve for the country, for this very important period of time for the country, and especially having a chance to kind of invest in building such kind of institution is really kind of privilege. And we kind of really see that opportunity not only for us, but as I said many times, for the country as well.
Haykuhi, thank you for that very comprehensive, detailed, and inspiring description of the very in-depth work that the Commission has been doing over the past 14 months. Adam, let me ask you in response to Haykuhi's sort of description of a key challenge, which is how to bring civil society in as a partner in the business of corruption prevention. As she described it very well, this requires a certain degree of education and public awareness raising, but it also entails this building of integrity from the, as a matter of training, discipline. It has its own separate requirements and criteria, and the CPC, I should say, is unique in the region for introducing this metric, for introducing the idea that government officials should be measured for their integrity before they take office, while they're in office. And so just a question over to you is, how do you envision USAID working with that tool and working with the challenge of bringing civil society in on a scaled basis, on a critical mass basis?
There we go. I was just having some challenges unmuting myself. I'll start with the question about civil society, and it's a great point. And I think civil society's role has been incredibly critical in this. And I think one of the reasons why we were able to get to this point to be able to take a systemic approach is because Armenia had a relatively favorable enabling environment for civil society, and this really gave civil society the space to be able to engage with citizens and developing working relationships with the government. And one example I give is that in the immediate aftermath of the revolution, the anti-corruption strategy that the government put forward was very much a retread of the previous government's draft. And it was civil society that, in their advocacy role, really stood up and provoked the government to put together, with civil society's input, a much more ambitious strategy that does take this systemic role. And so at USAID, I think we see civil society's role in this as being integral. And so we are supporting civil society to be able to play this role in public awareness raising on anti-corruption issues, on civic education, to be able to inculcate a culture of anti-corruption in the country, but also building their skills on research, use of data and evidence, to be able to engage in that dialogue process and really engage in that mutual accountability role that they're being asked to do as part of this collective action approach.
Thank you very much. Haykuhi, obviously you've you've had to do all of what you've just described in very adverse circumstances, including a pandemic, but also the recent war. And so if you could comment perhaps for this audience on how that has impacted you in your role and highlighted the importance of what you're doing.
Thanks, Matthew, for this question. Actually, what I have described, I think we could have doubled if there were, because for us, we just started in late November, and we had to kind of start working remotely from March. And all the activities that we planned, having large public events, having large discussions, what we are planning to do, what we really want the civil society partners and citizens to be engaged, just were gone. We kind of we kind of continued the work internally, and that's also caused this reason that now we have a little bit separation from the society, as I said. And then when a war started, I think it, as everyone, we in the CPC also were so much kind of affected personally. But at the same time, I think we understood very well that the war has undermined also the importance of this kind of institutions that are there to struggle against corruption. It demonstrated the importance of our work, like in building the institution for the state sovereignty, for the struggling against corruption, but also for building our own democracy. So this was kind of challenge for us to kind of work in this kind of environment. But it also somehow demonstrated this opportunity that there is a chance through institution building to sustain not only against the corruption, but also against such kind of happenings as war. I mean, like having a strong internal democracy, having strong institutions that are there to ensure the processes in the country in a way that accountability, transparency is ensured. I believe that will guarantee also that in our external relations, we are stronger, and then we are not in a position where we have kind of protect ourselves from these kind of attacks. We are there to demonstrate that there are strong boundaries and the country is somehow secured itself through the strong internal institutions and sustainable democratic values and rule of law.
Thank you very much, Haykuhi, for that very thoughtful perspective that I'm sure this audience can greatly appreciate. Dr. Cooley, I'm turning it over to you if you would.
Thank you so much for all of the questions. We've touched on some of them, so we'll try and get to as many as we can. I have a question here for Haykuhi from Jerome Leroux, who asks a specific question. The law on political parties, which was promulgated in December 2020, sanctioned the transfer of the supervision of political party finance to the CPC, effective as of January 2022. How will the CPC assume this additional mandate, and what initiatives will be put in place to meet the 2022 deadline?
Thanks for that question. Actually, I didn't mention that part of that mandate that we are given, but this is also a very important mandate to ensure that at least political corruption can be prevented in a country. So in the late December, the Parliament adopted amendments of the law where the CPC is given this mandate for the ensuring the financial accountability of the political parties, but also party founders and members will kind of submit declarations of asset, income, interest, and expenditure as well. And already having learned from 1 year experience how it feels and how it works actually to start with this kind of tasks, we had a large discussion with the members of the parliament, but also with the government and our international donor partners. With our request, the enforcement of law, as you mentioned, is due from the 22, because we said we need at least 1 year to kind of equip the CPC with required resources, capacities, to ensure that implementation of the provisions of that law will be effective as much as it is expected. So as soon as the law has been adopted, we started the kind of discussions with donors. We have developed the activity plan with the time frame, indication of the resources, what CPC will need, when it will start, and how it will start the implementation of the provisions of the law. It's there, the process is already started, and we are looking forward to have our partners support, to develop the methodology. We have developed methodology for the analysis of asset declarations for public officials, but we see that there is a difference, for example, for analyzing the financial reports of the political parties, declarations of the members of the political parties. For this, we will kind of start exploring the best practices, experience, trying to adopt it in a relevant way for Armenian context, but also kind of educating our staff members in a way that they are able to do this kind of important task. We put there also this component for the electronic system, so it will still require addition in our system to ensure that the automated function helps and supports the CPC to conduct the analyze process properly and without any possible human intervention there. So we are looking forward very much kind of to the implementation of these provisions as well.
Great, thank you. Next, a question for Adam. This is based on the question asked by Damian Murphy, who says, I appreciate the work of the CPC, an example it can set for similar institutions around the world. And we are excited about the renewed attention to the anti-corruption efforts abroad by the Biden administration. But part of this effort means first getting our own house in order and preventing dirty money from abroad being cycled through our financial system. And he brings up a question of the international dimension and the way several institutions, enablers, and practices in the West and the US might be implicated in some of the grand corruption dynamics. And we've seen this very dramatically in the case of Ukraine. And so, Adam, my question to you is, in your country work and your regional work, how do you think about the international dimension and networks and context through which both grand corruption is taking place and both through which it can be combated as well, and the multiple sort of leverage and pressure points?
That's a great question. And, I'll first just give a shout out to my colleagues in the State Department's Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement, because they very much do have that focus on transnational crimes. And looking at the specific question about financial crimes, I think there's a lot more that the US can be doing in terms of training countries, particularly their investigation capability, financial intelligence, prosecutors, judges on those intricacies of investigations and prosecutions of financial crimes and money laundering. And then I think, to the larger question, I think we very much see the issue of corruption, and one of the main drivers of why we're supporting these large anti-corruption efforts is because corruption is such a major vector of, I would say, malign influence, be that external or internal. And, I do really take to heart what Haykuhi said, that addressing corruption really is an issue of Armenia's sovereignty, and maintaining that sovereignty against kind of those malign influence which seek to interfere.
Thanks for that. Now we are almost out of time. Matthew, do you have some closing thoughts and words?
Yes, well, thank you, Alex. Let me start by addressing the people who have joined us today and saying thank you again for doing this. And let me also ask you to, as you take this forward, to consider that Armenia could very well be in the middle of a paradigm shift. And I say that as someone who has worked in this field of anti-corruption, rule of law for 3 decades, and in particular in this region. And what we've heard today and what I've distilled from my experience in Armenia over the past 18 months is that there's a unique commitment to do this in a holistic way, or in a whole of society way, as Adam referred to it. And there's also a high level of capacity around using all the best tools that are available in the field. And with those 2 ingredients in play, what's now required is patience. This is a very difficult endeavor, in the sense that political will is elusive. Political will can, it's really hard to unpack what it means in any given set of circumstances. And for the future of this and the sustainability of this, what will be required is patient support from all stakeholders. So I would encourage those of you who are interested in the field of anti-corruption, or who are interested in the future sovereignty of Armenia, to become engaged and support this effort in any way that you can, because there's a lot of exciting things happening on a policy and practice basis. But more importantly, it's a moment, I think, when Armenia, under Haykuhi's leadership, with the guidance of USAID and other donors, can make a transformational change and do it with the right spirit and with the right long-term goals of building, integrity into the culture of government and society. So I'm delighted that we've had a chance, Haykuhi, to give you and Adam the opportunity to talk today, because I know the work is lonely, and you're out there and you're in the middle of 16-hour days, and just very appreciative of the work that you're doing, and just want to encourage everybody to help in any way they can by giving support and building awareness internationally about this important effort. With that in mind, Haykuhi, Adam, we just have a minute if you'd like to say, goodbye. And
if I may, Matthew, I just want to thank you once again for organizing this event and giving us a chance to speak. I have tried to reply to some of the questions, typing the answer, but I would like to encourage, if there are any other questions, please send us through our Facebook page, or just going to our webpage, cpcarmenia.am, and then when you find the email, just send us what you think, your thoughts also. If anything, what I have said, you see that you can kind of contribute on offering more innovative ideas how we move further, we will be kind of more than happy to receive and try to proceed with them. Thanks again so much for this.
thanks, everybody. Adam, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for giving Armenia the platform to share some of the great work that's being done here. And as you said, it is a long and patient process, but you know, in the end, we do hope it'll be a model for the region and beyond.
Thank you so much to both of you. Thank you to Matthew for organizing this and co-chairing what's going to be an exciting panel series. Thank you also to everyone who tuned in, to our partners, the Armenian Center, CAPI. Please look out for sort of future events that we have, and we will follow the work of the CPC with great interest, as will other countries around the world. And remember, what happens is a beacon and a model, and the possibility of policy diffusion is very real. So thanks, and thank you, audience, for sharing your lunch hour and your dinner hours with us. Stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.